Deena is here to have with us a candid discussion on diversity in tech and talk about how we can close the gap. So, Deena, for folks that have joined us since you introduced yourself for the group panel, can you go ahead and reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So, Deena McKay, I am a podcast host. I have a podcast called Black Tech Unplugged, where I highlight and interview individuals who work in tech and their impact. So people who are founders, people who work in the industry in different roles, I interview them on my podcast. And then also I am a scrum master in the tech space. So I call the podcast like my 5 to 9, and then my 9 to 5 is being a scrum master.
Nice. It makes such a big difference to have an actual scrum master on a team. My very first job had a dedicated scrum master, and I was like, I took it so for granted, and then my next job didn't, and I was like, no.
Well, when you don't have a scrum master, you kind of like, you become your own scrum master. Mm-hmm. But then if everyone isn't familiar with the role, then it's like not everyone is becoming their own scrum master, and then it becomes like a little chaotic, just a little bit.
I feel like that's like my hardest part of being an adult, honestly, because like I at my very first job,
your own scrum master.
Yeah, like my own project manager. I'm not qualified for that. Like, absolutely not. Prioritize things? What? No. Like,
real quick, it looks like someone missed the name of the podcast. Can you give that to us again?
Yes. It is Black Tech Unplugged. I'm putting it hopefully in the chat. Did that come through?
We will share it for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I can't comment on comments, but I'll say it here.
I don't think so. Yeah,
okay.
Black Tech Unplugged.
BlackTechUnplugged.com if you want to listen. Perfect. Thank you. Actually just released an episode today on cybersecurity, so go check that out.
Ooh, that is very interesting.
Yeah, my guest was Henri Davis, and we talked about what cybersecurity is, different roles, all the good stuff.
I was shocked at what a completely different world that I dabbled. I've jumped. So I feel like I'm always like, I worked in a job that did that. I worked in a job that did that. Everyone thinks I'm making it up as I go. I swear to God, I did all of these things for a year at a time. And then I moved on.
And in tech, you have to jump around to different things to see what you actually like, right?
Yeah. But I did a year working in a cybersecurity company, and it was wild to me how different that was. I'm definitely going to go listen to that episode.
Awesome.
But one of the things that I'm actually interested to talk about a little bit with you is how you got into tech, because I saw on your website that you actually started off, you went to school for and worked for a bit as an athletic trainer, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
no!
It's not like a horrible experience or a bad story, but I just can't believe in high school, going into college, really thought I was going to be an athletic trainer and work with these big muscular professional men and help them. And I'm not I'm 5'5", I'm not small, but I'm an average size woman. And it's what did I really think I was doing? So I thought going into high school I was going to do that. Went to college and did a semester. And after that semester, I was like, this is really not for me. I don't want to do this anymore, but what am I good at? And so always had the latest technology, love playing video games. I was always a tech type of person, but didn't identify as a techie or a nerd. But I knew in the back of my mind, I didn't want to be a developer because I knew I can't just sit still and code. So what else can I do? And I was like, well, I'll do information systems, which is a mix of computers and business. So still got the computer side, but then also learned the business marketing and management and all of those different courses, along with learning how to develop and code and tech stuff. So the best of two good worlds.
Great. The crucial mistake you made here was telling the chat that you playing video games.
That's going to come back.
I know this group, and that's going to come back.
So many people. So many people. Yeah. What's your gaming system? What do you play on?
Oh, that is hard.
You have all of the things?
I don't have all of the things. am very like into the nostalgia part of video games. I still have a Super Nintendo. and like a lot of games, like all the games.
Yes.
So I like going the nostalgic route. But I mean, I still like play other things, but I feel like Nintendo, like, I don't know, takes me back to like, you know, back in the day when things were kind of like simple.
Yeah, I feel you. My PS1 is still in regular rotation. But I do want to jump back over. You talked a little bit about the podcast, and I'm curious to hear a little bit what inspired you to start the podcast. What's kind of the story behind that?
Yeah, so I was working in a role, and I was the only Black person in the entire department, and there were there were like a handful of women in the department. So remember earlier we were talking, if you were here for the panel discussion, we were talking about feeling included or an inclusive environment. Well, I didn't feel like I was not included. I didn't feel like I could bring my full self, or I didn't feel like anyone related to me in the department. And so I was like really feeling burnt out. I was really feeling down. So I was like, what can I do to like lift my spirits? What can I do? I'm getting all this advice from different people as well during this time. Let me backtrack a little bit. And I'm getting it from my friends, other people who are in the industry who have experienced this. So as I'm gathering all this information for myself, I'm like, okay, why isn't this like common knowledge? Like, what are we like gatekeeping this information because we're all going through the same thing, but no one's talking about it. So at first I was like, maybe I should just like do some blog posts. And I'm like, okay, that'd be kind of cool, but that's not really going to be helpful from my perspective. What's something that can last for a long time and people can go back and reference? And it's like a podcast. And so I just started interviewing my friends who were giving me all this wonderful advice and telling their stories. And it just became a thing, and I continue to do it. And I continue to share the stories and advice that other people have about the tech industry.
That is so awesome. I love that you were like, you're telling me, but why could we not be telling everyone?
Yeah. I mean, it is, I guess, like, even thinking back on the comment of, like, conferences and getting different perspectives, you go to all these events and you're, like, gathering all this information. But let's be real, when you go to a conference and you hear these things, it's, like, it's exciting for, like, that week, 2 weeks after, and then, like, it kind of, like, goes away. And it's, like, I wanted something that was a little bit more permanent or that you could go back and revisit.
Yeah.
And so podcasting gives you that element.
Like it's something that comes back into your life, right? Like, I don't know, every week or every couple of weeks, there's a new episode. And so you're re-engaging with it as opposed to a conference where you're in it for a weekend and then you're just gone, you're out. So
yes,
I think it makes a ton of sense.
With your podcast, I was going to ask about, do you often get stories or even give advice on like being a Black like person in tech or a Black woman? Like I would love to hear if you have even stories of like challenges that you faced and how you've overcome them, or maybe I know you talked about you have friends who are like mentoring you. If you've got cool stories from them of like how they've overcome challenges and advice for people who are listening.
Yes, definitely. So the format of my podcast, just to give some transparency there, a lot of the episodes are me interviewing someone else and sharing their stories. And in that respect, I can also add in my own anecdotes of like, here's what happened to me too. And like, let's talk through that and kind of laugh because it's over. And then there's also like solo episodes that I do where I talk about the challenges or I talk about my role so that people can learn that way as well. So it's a platform where I would say it's like double-sided. Yes, I'm interviewing people and sharing knowledge, but I'm adding in my own stories. And one episode that I did recently, it was called Art Imitating Life, where I had a production company join me. They wrote something called Frame of Reference, and it's a drama series. And so they were talking about a guy who's a Black CTO and all the nuances that come with that and the external factors that come with that. And then I had a CTO that came on and was like, this is my real experience. And it's like conversations like that where you're like, oh, that happened to me. And, you know, something like that happened to me. And seeing the connections and seeing that everybody has those experiences, that's kind of what I live for, because we all have similar experiences. Again, we all relate in some way, but to see that conversation happening in real time is always amazing.
That is so awesome. Wow. I wonder if you'd be willing to break down kind of some of those challenges. Because I think for some of our listeners who are not people of color, who are not women, you and I will talk and kind of be like, oh, this happened to me, or like, gosh, this was cringeworthy. And even just between women, it's often enough that I can be like, yeah, I get that, But for people that are on the outside or that haven't had those experiences, can you maybe break down what you're talking about when we talk about these common challenges?
Yeah, so some of the common challenges could be, and we talked about this on the panel too, is just like the gap. And sometimes it's not even just a pay gap, which is what we talked about, but it could be a gap in opportunities. So because of gender, because of race, you don't get as many opportunities to your door. And sometimes you see individuals who don't look like you being handed these opportunities. Whereas as a Black woman, or just as a woman in general, a lot of times we have to pave our own path, which means that we have to go after these opportunities. We have to be in front with our hand raised saying, hey, I want to do this too. So that's the experience. A lot of women that I know in industry, and just in any industry, just in the professional corporate world, have experienced that quite a bit. And then also self-promotion. Sometimes women are not promoted as often as some of their counterparts. And so learning how to self-promote and say, hey, I'm doing this work and I deserve some of these things too, so important. And I think that,
yes,
I don't know about for you all, it's like learning how to promote yourself is first off the most awkward
painful
thing to do, because we're not taught how to do that.
Yes.
You're taught like, go to work and work hard and everyone's gonna see it. And it's like, okay, they see it, but not everyone's saying like, hey, we see you, which makes it like complete different.
And sometimes they don't even see it, and you have to spell it out. And then they're like, oh, and you're like, this is painful.
Right. Because it makes you, again, it goes back to, it makes you feel like you are not included. It makes you feel like, what am I even doing here? Like, what is the purpose? And then that makes you question your purpose, which also goes to the theme of, I don't know if anyone's really been talking about it lately, but like the number of women or people of color leaving tech because they don't feel included. And it's like they go to a completely different industry because they don't feel like their skills and their talent are worth anything. And it's so sad to see.
Yeah. I was really glad that Selam brought that up briefly during the panel discussion, because I think we think, right, a lot about getting people in, not about keeping them, and like pointing out their work and promoting them and compensating them appropriately. Those are all crucial parts of retention.
Definitely.
Yeah, someone's saying in the chat that in the tech industry, I don't want to promote myself because I know there are far more people with more expertise. Yeah, more expertise.
I feel like sometimes, I'm not saying this is all the time, so don't take me wrong, but I feel like sometimes that's a myth too that we have in the tech industry.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is, and think about it for yourselves, how many times have you been on a job and people are told to go do something and they're going and Googling how to do that thing? So it's like, yes, they might seem like the expert, but we're all kind of on a level playing field, even though we don't think we are. And not to say that people who have more experience or more time in a role don't have that, expertise, but I think that we take for granted that we know more than we let on.
I agree. And I also think that the idea of like promoting automatically meaning overshadowing can also be false too, right? Like adding your voice to a group does not necessarily mean you're shouting over someone else. You have to be aware of that. Sometimes you can be, And so a little bit of self-awareness. Am I shutting other people down in order for me to speak? But contributing to a discussion is not necessarily overshadowing. And a lot of times that's all promotion is. It's just kind of putting yourself at the table or speaking up when you're already there. Like, hey, I have an idea too, and there are ways to do that don't overshadow and that are respectful of everyone else there as well. So.
And another way to put yourself out there too, Kathryn, just so the point that you're making of self-promotion is when there are opportunities that show up, just putting yourself out there and showing the work you're doing. So for instance, one thing could be if you have like quarterly meetings and they ask for volunteers to show the stuff that they're working on, raise your hand. It might be scary at first. In fact, it's probably like really scary at first, but it's totally worth it. So people see what you're doing because you're doing valuable things. You wouldn't be there if you weren't.
Absolutely. No, that was actually a big part of how I got into conference speaking. I was kind of looking for a place where I could share and a place where it was appropriate to share, and where I was wanting to I felt like I had maybe not unique experiences, but I'd solved some different problems. And I was excited to talk about them with other people who got it, And conference speaking turned out to be that opportunity for me. And I think for a lot of folks, that people feel really nervous about kind of throwing their hat in the ring for opportunities like that, when it can be, at least for me, that was very career changing.
Well, I think too, like with conference speaking, you might feel like this one person on this big stage, and it can be scary, but I do think, like you said, it's a wonderful opportunity to share your expertise and also to find your tribe.
Yes. My people.
Yes.
Because as Kathryn was talking about, I was like, I think I got into and stayed in conferences because I just felt like I belonged. But because I was like, yes, I have things I want to teach. I will always have things I want to like show and teach, but like I just really just fit and I belong and I love it, and I wanted to get more of that. So, but oh goodness, for people, I wanted to ask you, you talked and gave us some tips on sides of like the individual for like self-promotion or volunteering in different situations. Is there something or any things that you see on the other side of it from the corporate side of how like whether it's in the culture or whether it's something the employer is like doing or changing to make diversity and inclusion a priority on their team?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think a couple of ways that I see that are when you are on a team, and let's just say you have to add a new team member, and sometimes you're involved in the interviewing process of just like calling out those biases that people are talking about. I think we talked about the name bias, which is a very big one, and it's kind of an obvious one when it comes to diversity. So like something like that. Also from a diversity standpoint, looking at a company's C-suite. So if someone's screaming diversity, 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 but then I'm seeing the same exact carbon copy in your C-suite, you might want to double check on that. And I know that happens so often, more than we want to admit out loud, but it is what it is. And also just checking the numbers. So I feel like it's kind of hit or miss with the numbers, because sometimes it's like most companies at one point weren't releasing the numbers. Then around 2020, there was a release of numbers. I don't know where we're at anymore, but like taking a look at the numbers, comparing that to the C-suite, you kind of get the realistic picture of like what's going on within a company diversity wise.
I've seen, especially more recently, kind of companies that are looking to make that shift, starting things like diversity and inclusion committees, or running programs, or starting employee resource groups. But a lot of times I also kind of see that met with some skepticism, especially from the existing employees. I'm kind of curious whether you think if those are effective or ineffective, or ways that they could be. Are they effective when they're done a specific way? Is there value in those kinds of things?
Okay, I'm going to say yes and no, because this is a little bit of a loaded question.
And that was a complex question.
Thanks, Kathryn.
I don't have an opinion on this. I want to put things out there and talk them through.
Okay, I'll start, and then Kathryn, jump in if your thoughts like mix with mine. So first off, it's like when you ask an employee to do this is like an additional task. So if you're not paying them, it kind of is like a weird feeling, because it's like, okay, I'm doing this extra work and it's to make you look good, but in a way it's like, what is this doing for the employees themselves?
Oh, so you've seen it tacked on to like a person's job not be their job?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So to join,
I've seen it and experienced it.
Oh.
There are members of our team who are on like a diversity and inclusion committee at Progress. And,
that's true. But I guess it's like, because we also have like people that's their job, like that is their title. And so I was like,
you do have HR folks that are there
So
I-
wait,
But that to
the
me
HR
feels separate.
folks then, are the HR folks making the plan and then the other people are executing it, or how does that work?
I
That's
would,
where you get-
sorry, what did you say, Kathryn?
I was gonna say, I am not a part of this particular committee, so I don't think I can speak to exactly how it functions. But it is a mix of kind of corporate, maybe not C-suite, but folks that are higher up trying to affect change, and folks from various departments who are intending to collaborate to make the workplace a more diverse and inclusive environment.
Mm.
And again, I think I'm with you on some mixed feelings, so I'm curious for you to finish. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I think the other piece of it, though, is because individuals are like boots on the ground, they know what people are thinking and feeling from a company perspective. Obviously, having their insights is valuable, and obviously they know what people truly want versus like the smoke and mirrors of like what companies think we want but we really don't want.
Yeah.
So I see both sides of it, but it's a catch-22, especially if it's like you have a certain role plus you're going to be taking this on. Like, how do you find the balance and how do you feel valued in both arenas,
Absolutely.
But Kathryn, I'm intrigued. What are your thoughts around what you've been seeing in that experience?
I think that it can be done well, but I think that often it's not. In a lot of places where I've worked, I think it's something that's done as a gesture and not necessarily to affect real change. And again, that's not always. I can think of at least one place where I've worked where they are really dedicated to doing like serious education and bringing in guest speakers and like getting everyone on board and coming up with actionable things that we kind of did like a trial and error, but it was a very small company, kind of startup size, easier to pivot, just kind of it was a different situation and a different culture than somewhere that has hundreds and hundreds of employees kind of all around the world, and the differences in culture and race and privilege that come into that when you're dealing with a global corporation, right? That not everyone was coming from the same, even just cultural background. And so there was a lot, it's different. There's a lot of talk to say, it depends, but I think it really depends. I think it can be done well, but I feel frustrated when I see that it's done as something that we can point out and say, look at our diversity and inclusion committee.
Right. Yeah.
So, but I am interested. You talked a little bit about kind of the different experiences, and I know that on your website you've done some speaking around kind of the intersection of race and privilege in corporate culture. So I was curious if you could kind of break that down. How do those come into play? What do we need to be aware of when we're dealing with a work environment that is global and that is, incorporating people from all types of different backgrounds, races, genders, religions? The list can go on.
Right. Definitely the list can go on and on and on. I think working with teams, again, I'm going to stress on the point of being like relating to your other colleagues from a global perspective, even if it's someone who's in the office, making sure that there's always at least one thing that you both can relate to, you like, whatever. Yeah. Use that as a piece to build a relationship. But most importantly, when you're building relationships with people, I just want to remind people that it's okay to be curious. I think that we've kind of lost that curiosity, but that curiosity is what builds genuine relationships. So for me, it's like, it's okay if you have a question about maybe like something from a perspective of being a woman or, religious observation. I'm okay if you ask me a question as long as you ask it politely and your genuine curiosity shows. So continue to ask questions. If you don't know something and you want to learn about your teammate, there's always a way to go about it, asking, being curious. But I will also note, because sometimes maybe it's just scary, like you want to ask your teammate something, you're afraid they're going to take it the wrong way. Utilize your other teammates because they might have the same question too. and be able to help you. Now, also from a inclusion perspective and like fostering those relationships is like openness. So a lot of times we think we're open, and then like you kind of get in the workspace and you're like, maybe I'm open as much as I thought I was. So keep that energy of like being open and, again, curious, open and curious about the people around you, because that's really what's going to build that connection. That's really what's going to help other people feel included. And then the last piece is also teaching them about yourself. So maybe you want people to know, like for instance, right now it's Ramadan. Maybe people don't understand what Ramadan is, why you do it, like what are you even doing? Share that with people. Help them learn about you by being, again, open and sharing the things that you're going through from a personal level. I think a lot of times, depending on the environment too, it's like, it's a serious environment and we're here to work. And
Yeah,
that's all we're
working.
here to do. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, that can only last for so long. Like, let's be real. You spend a lot of time with these people. You're spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's a lot of time. And in order, if you're going to continue to be around people, you have to have some kind of personal or outside of work conversation. So be open to that and be open to sharing.
Yeah, I think having those.
I really like the emphasis.
Oh, sorry, you go. Didn't mean to. You go, Kathryn.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
I was just saying those personal bridges, I think, really make you better as a team too in the long run of like, oh, because I have that relationship with this person, I am more compassionate when, you know, like they're behind, or I am more open to, you know, like, okay, I'm going to take this load from you right now because you really need the help. Whatever the thing is, I think if you have that team dynamic where you do have the human level, it's I guess just a friendlier and more like cohesive team in the long haul. So,
I mean, and we're all humans. Who doesn't want to be treated like a human?
Right.
But there's, like I said, there's a lot of times where people are like, I'm here for work and I'm only going to do work. But then you miss that element of like, let's just say, perfect example, I had a team member who was getting married, and we know, like, well, if you don't know, when people are getting married, it's depending on how things are going, it can be a little stressful or you're a little overwhelmed, and it's like everyone was pushing him to do these things, and it's like, you know, he's getting married tomorrow, so
like tomorrow, like, okay.
I don't
breathe,
think
but
he needs a break. Like, can we take something off his plate and help him,
right.
as opposed to saying, why are you doing this? So it's that human element that makes things better for everyone involved.
Yes. Yeah, I really liked your emphasis on like just genuine, honest curiosity, which I think is a trait that not a lot of us, or rather that we overlook, right? Because like just coming with an openness of like, what's going on with you? What's happening in your life? Tell me a little bit about this. And like questions that are asked respectfully are almost never genuinely hurtful, you know, when it's truly coming from a place of questioning and wanting to know more and understand. Like,
and I think,
so go on.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think we overthink being curious. Because there's so much out there, like cancel culture and like, you know, all these things. Everyone's always upset about something. And it's like, sometimes people are just asking a genuine question they don't know. And it's okay to not know. Again, we don't know everything. People are Googling things.
Right.
Like for work, like things. It's okay to not know. But that's also goes back to the open piece. Be open to these questions. It's okay.
Yeah. That was actually one of the myths that we ended up not getting to in our giant list, because I made a whole bunch. Was something about like it's impossible to get it completely right because, you know, I'm gonna say something, I'll eventually end up offending someone, so I might as well just not engage with it or not worry about it. And like that's such a loss, though. There are ways to do it, I think, respectfully and politely.
I agree. I definitely agree.
I do want to jump over. We had a good question from Overland Gamer who was asking if it was beneficial to hire a consultant to come in and evaluate around kind of diversity and inclusion and company culture, or if it's better to have someone internal that you've hired specifically to manage that.
Good question. I would say it depends. So I've seen both work. I would say it depends on the maturity of diversity and inclusion and what actual results you're looking for. So if you're early on, you've never really had diversity and inclusion be at the core of the business, and you're trying to evolve there, I would say bring someone in, because bringing someone in, they have that expertise. They're kind of giving you that baseline of where you need to be. Whereas if the company has already been doing it, they're trying to evolve and get better at what they've been doing, I think it would be okay to hire someone, but always getting an outside opinion is helpful, because
that makes sense.
They're new to the space, and usually external consultants for DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion usually have a kind of like baseline / checklist that they use that if you just hire someone might fall to the wayside. So it really depends on what your company is already doing and where they want to go.
Good answer.
Yep, definitely. Thank you for that question, Overland. So one of the other things that I'm curious about is for teams that are kind of trying to make a change, trying to be more diverse and inclusive. We've talked a little bit about kind of at a corporate level, but what about at an individual level? So if you're a manager or a team lead or even just an individual contributor, what can people do to personally make these connections and support members of underrepresented groups on their team who might not feel that sense of belonging yet?
I think if you sense that it's like from an individual level of you see like maybe one or two of your teammates doesn't feel like they fit in, I would approach them and just ask in a polite, maybe direct way of like, what can we do to make you feel more included? Like, what do you like to do? What can we, start implementing into the team practices to do that? A lot of times when I am first forming a team, if it's a team that is we're co-located, and so like, let's just say we could go to the office every week. If depending on our sprints, like to celebrate the sprint, it's like, let's go out and like do a happy hour, or if you're not into drinks, let's do an activity. So for instance, I just had what's called PI planning in Agile. And so we planned for the next quarter. We did all this work, but it was like, okay, let's all go do a team activity. Let's go throw darts. And everyone loved it. And,
apparently some people take dart throwing like it's an Olympic sport type thing,
like a competitive thing.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
I never realized people were so intense about darts.
So into it.
To this.
Oh
I was
goodness.
like, okay, I don't know how to aim or anything. I'm just here for fun, but okay.
Right.
I was gonna say, that's always something I've done for fun with like a glass of beer in the other hand. I didn't realize folks were like
I was at a conference in Germany last month, and I was sitting there with my boss, and we were watching on the TV in the restaurant, and there was like a stadium, and I was like, oh, what sport is this? People screaming with their signs and their jerseys. And I'm like, what sport is this? I'm not even kidding you. Like huge, like thousands of people. And these guys come out, and they're all like, they got like ridiculous hair. And then there's like a dartboard on the stage. And I'm like, this is not a dart, like legit sport. And it was like, we just sat there, watched like open mouthed and so I think you just gotta be careful. Some people really take their darts seriously. So if it's a team building activity and you got somebody on your team who's like a professional, I don't know.
To be fair, I have never once attended a team building activity where there wasn't one person taking it life or death. It doesn't matter what the activity is.
What?
It's karaoke.
Wait, you've never had this, Deena, where like there's always somebody in the group who's like
person.
I don't think so my experience hasn't been it's like life or death, but it's definitely like I cannot lose. Like it's like I will not be the
real
loser.
competitive.
Yeah, real competitive. Like the time before that, This is going to sound like we do a lot of crazy activities. The time before that, we did axe throwing.
Okay, yeah.
And so...
No, someone in the chat was saying that as well. That's evidently really common.
And your team got really into it? They were like...
Well, so I had never axed, like, I don't have axes at home. I'm just throwing axes all the time. And so we went, they were like, surprisingly, Deena was, like, really good. I was like, did you guys think, like, you're just gonna beat me all night? Like what? And they were like, I want her on my team if we go again. And so it's like always like, who can you have on your what I do like about my team building, it always ends up with who can you have on your team so that you can win the next team building event?
Yeah.
So at least that brings some kind of camaraderie, I guess. Camaraderie and bragging rights.
Bragging rights are huge. So what do you think makes a good team building activity? Because I've been to some that are a blast and I've had a great time. And I've been to some where it's like, all right, 40 minutes until mandatory fun is complete.
Oh my God, mandatory fun. Yes. I have to like work on my attitude because there's so many times where I'm like, I'm here.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
I always feel like you're having a blast, Alyssa.
Excellent.
Well, actually, before I answer that, Alyssa, I have like, so when you're in those situations, what makes it feel like it's like the mandatory fun? Like, why am I here?
I think it's because it's so obviously like you will have fun and you will get to know your team members, and I'm just like,
so help me God.
Like, if we're gonna be this on the nose about it, like, can I just like sit in a room with Kathryn and give her like 20 questions? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just, without the charade of a, you know, whatever, you know, treasure hunt we're on. So I guess I just, I can be really negative in my head sometimes about things like that. And I have to tell myself, like, Alyssa, this is for the good of your team. Grow up, right? Like, grow up. And so then I make myself be nice. But I
get what you're saying, but I think that's a very real experience. And I think everyone's lying if they haven't been in at least one corporate team building icebreaker activity where they've just had to power through. That's why I was so curious about what you think makes a successful one of these.
Yes, tell us.
Infamous one.
We need to learn what is.
Usually, I started off as like a team discussion. Like, okay, what are some things like we would want to do? And like, for instance, the last one, it was kind of like, okay, we know we're all coming into the office. What do we want to do? We don't call it team building. We're just like, what do we want to do after to have some fun? Yeah. And so like darts came up, but it's like I make it a team discussion as opposed to we're gonna do 20 questions and you meet your teammate. No, we're not doing that. I'm sorry. That's like people. That's just boring. Like But I will say, okay, so there's something called lean coffee. So like, let's just say your team's kind of new. You guys don't really know each other. Like, just set up like a 10-15 minute coffee chat where it's like you start talking, you learn each other's interests, you know, whatever you want to talk about. I don't care if you sit there in silence for 15 minutes. That's up to you. But it's like giving you the option to like meet. That's like a one-on-one thing. Like anytime it's like that, I don't know, like 20 minutes, something, like just make that a one-on-one, like not team thing. For team things though, it's like, honestly, this is probably going to sound a little bad. Anything that's competitive, I feel like people will want to do. Like, no, even if it's true. Like, let's have like split our team in half and do an escape room. People would love that just because, like, who's going to get out first? Like, what are we going to do? Who's going to, you know? It's the
I think though I'm always stuck with the flop who's like, I don't know how to solve problems. And I'm like, you're a developer. You know how to solve problems. Like, get up here and solve this problem with me. No, I got to be more positive about team building.
Maybe you should just like take over the team building thing. I feel like you have fun ideas, but then like they don't use them.
I know. I think that's the hard part.
You're dragging us down, Steve. Pull it together.
And maybe it means that I'm the one that's too competitive, right? Like I'm taking this too seriously. I need to be like, okay, it's just a fun thing, you know. But yeah, but I agree with you. It's more fun if it is something that can be like competitive, like darts. I really want to, honestly, Kathryn, like the next time we need to do that because that would be so much fun. Or maybe, is it a hazard? Do you have to sign waivers?
No,
I
don't think I
for
did.
Darts. I did have to sign one. I went axe throwing once, and I did have to sign a waiver for that.
Yeah, you do have to sign a waiver for that.
Nerve-wracking.
That makes sense.
It is a weapon. So
I like the idea though of the lean coffee. I feel like our current like lead kind of, at least from what I've witnessed of one-on-ones myself, builds that into like our weekly thing. And at first I was like, wow, like we sure talk a lot about nothing. And then it was like a year later, I was like, oh my gosh, she's building a relationship with me. How dare she? Right? Like I felt so tricked.
Snuck in.
I think, and then like thinking about what you're saying about team building, I think that's what the difference is. It's like it just sneaks on in, like, maybe we're like kind of friendly and like work friends or whatever people want to call it these days.
2 years later, realizing like, no, I've accidentally made lifelong relationships with these people.
That's exactly it, and you just feel so duped, right? I was here to work. I love it. Very, very good advice, though, on all fronts so far. I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Although one thing to call out, also don't like center everything around alcohol because some people don't like drink. So then just like make sure for the people who do want to drink, like here's your option, but there's also like other things.
So I think that actually brings up a really good point. Because I was with a team once that was wanting to like give a reward to we did like an employee of the month kind of thing, and the reward was a bottle of wine, and they just had never thought about it, hadn't had a problem with it, and eventually ran into one person who kind of had to discreetly go back and say like, I'm really sorry, I can't drink, like, and give it back, like I can't have alcohol in my home. And it made everyone feel, that wasn't a good exchange. That didn't feel like a victory, and that person didn't feel celebrated, you know. But it was a genuine oversight on the part of the whoever it was that was giving those gifts. So I'm kind of curious if you have like a rule of thumb list or like, hey, things you should maybe consider around alcohol usage and this, that, or the other. Are there common things that you've felt that you've seen people make mistakes around?
Yeah, I think the one common thing is like centering some kind of like team building networking, whatever, centering that around alcohol. So it's like, we're going to network, but it's like a happy hour networking, and it's like they don't feel welcomed, they don't feel comfortable like being around all of this. So then it's like you lose the value of having that person there because they're like, I'm not doing this. And then it makes them feel like, are you ever going to do an activity where there's not alcohol? Like, can we not do that?
Yeah.
So I've seen that happen. Then it results in someone not feeling included, and it sucks. The only way to combat that, though, is to, one, if you're that person bringing it up, like, hey, can we do something that's not alcohol related? But as an ally, too, if you see that and you know that someone, like your coworker or someone isn't into that, bring it up to the group and say, next time we're not doing that. We're going to do something that's a little bit different. I think a lot of times we think it's the onus on the person themselves to like speak up. But if we're really going to make inclusive, diverse environments, we as allies or friends or however you want to put it, we also have to speak up on behalf of those that are in our groups.
Yeah. For sure. I think food has come up in our groups a lot too. We've got a lot of people who have different food needs, and like, you're completely right. Like just being able to speak up for someone, and it doesn't even have to be like, well, so-and-so is obviously allergic to shellfish, so why are we going to Red Lobster again? Right. Like it doesn't have to be that on the nose, but yeah, it's like, I don't know, like championing for people, maybe even as your own opinion, even if it's not, because maybe not everybody knows about a certain thing and it doesn't need to come to light, right? Like, but you're still moving the group towards a more inclusive experience for everybody. So.
Right, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, and I really like speaking up for other people makes all the sense in the world, right? Because I think a lot of times we think about like, oh, it's that person's responsibility to speak up. But if you haven't already established that friendly and inclusive environment, then asking somebody to speak up and like put the kibosh on an idea that other people are actively excited about, that is hard. That is a big ask. Like, I know you guys are all thrilled about this, winery tour, but not for me.
Right.
Ooh,
and I think we have to keep in mind that everyone's not us. And what I mean by that is everyone's not an extrovert, or everyone doesn't have that. Like sometimes people are afraid to speak up, especially if it's something they feel like is personal.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you know something and you have that inside information, why not try to help them be comfortable? And you don't even have to reveal like, hey, they don't, like, let's just say they don't drink because, you know, maybe they had an experience with alcoholism or something like that.
Right.
It's like, you don't have to go into all of the details. Just say, hey, I know this isn't, our team member isn't comfortable with this. What can we do?
Yep.
So there's definitely ways around just like revealing everything, and then also being cognizant that not everyone is like a vocal, boisterous, do what I say person. So.
Yep. I think I'm going to make a slight generalization here. I think we have more of those introverts on development teams.
True. Fair.
So, yeah, my dad always is an engineer and also likes to tell this joke about, you know, how can you tell the extroverted engineer he looks at your shoes while he's talking.
Got him.
That's a dad joke.
That's a good one.
But I think there's maybe a grain of truth in that the types of people who work really well in remote environments on their own all day kind of.
What are you trying to say about
I'm talking about me
and my personality?
I'm talking about myself because I'm a huge introvert. And I'm going to sign off from this stream and not talk to anyone for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really hard. That can be a challenge to get. When I find that I'm the most extroverted person in the room, that's
is that like a big panic situation?
Yeah.
It's like all the conversations now on you.
I had someone, I think, jokingly tell me that I was a personality hire on a team once. And I'm 80% sure they were kidding. But they were like, you come on and you make jokes and you say good morning and, you know, want to put GIFs in the Slack. I'm like, other folks would not intrinsically do that.
Oh, my word.
You gotta try and find a balance. But that stuff, I find it so crucial. It sounds very silly, but I think it makes a big difference. Slack culture is a real thing.
Oh, for sure. Has anyone ever been on like a silent Slack? Like, what's the point?
Yeah. I need tips on like how to force yourself to interact with the humans. Part 1, send a GIF, right? Like, I don't know. I need a manual, a formula of how to be better because there's so many times
let's say you hypothetically work on a team of Alyssas who don't want to
it's so hard.
Engage. I'm joking with you.
But
folks that are naturally going to kind of struggle a little bit to make those connections. Is there anything we can do to foster a more kind of welcoming or open or encouraging environment? Or is there a certain amount of just, this is how people are, and we also kind of need to respect that as well?
So there's a certain amount of this is how people are, like, let's respect that. But again, building relationships. What I've done to do that, like sometimes people just need a little, what I'll call a nudge. So like for me, what I would do for that is like on Fridays, I would do something called the Fun Scrum question and ask a question that, you know, draws out those quieter people. So I'm trying to think of what some of those questions would be. I haven't done it in a while. I think one of them could be like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Or if you had to choose between Fruit Loops, a bagel, or pancakes, what would you choose for breakfast? Like, just like silly questions that make people think, but then like make people laugh too. And then there's also like, sometimes in Slack at different companies I've worked at, there's different channels for different interests. And it's like, you encourage people to go like join some of those that interest them, and you can talk if you want to, and if you don't, keep working. Like you don't have to participate.
I always feel bad though. You know, I see all these people and they're talking and they have thoughts and I'm like, wow.
You have thoughts?
not like there's a lot of people that are very talented at it with the talking and the back and forth. And I'm just like,
what is like when you see people on Slack like going back and forth, what is the conversation? Like what is
it could be anything. It could be like, you know, actual like work related, or it could just be like a fun conversation. And I'm just like, it's daunting. It's just it's daunting because I look at it and I'm like, oh, I just like start sweating. Like I don't know. Oh, this is so much. Like it just feels like a lot. And I think it's just because I I don't like, I'm much better with like, you know, the faces versus the Slackses. So I feel like I opt out a lot, and even things like social media. And I think that's where a lot of devs are just like, I just don't, you know, like, because it's just like a fire hose, and you're like, where would I even, you know, step into it? And so I think I like that of like the best time I've seen like diversity and inclusion done well was when it was A, genuine, but B, almost, and this is going to sound weird, manipulative, because it was so slyly done. You know what I mean? Like it was so well executed by the person who was, whether they were advocating for someone, and you have no idea they're advocating for someone, right? But they just advocated for someone, and they moved the group towards a different conversation, or they saved an awkward something that just happened. And I think those are the champions and the silent winners for me of the team that I see working hard, and I'm like, oh, I see what you did there, right? Like, oh, okay, like, right, like that. I feel like, I think you do have to draw, especially in our community. I think there's a lot of introverts, people who just struggle like with different forms of communication. But I tip my hat to the silent diversity and inclusion manipulators. This is a horrible title for these
Please
people.
stop calling them manipulators.
Well, because they're manipulating. It's for good, but they are manipulating the situation.
They are transformers.
Transformers. Thank you.
I feel like manipulators is like.
It's got a bad. It's got right. That's good.
I was like, I see what you're saying, and I don't like that description.
You're like, it's the wrong word, Alyssa. Stop using it. I got you. Transformers.
Well, I think too, Alyssa, you said something that you didn't even realize. A lot of times, like, yes, we're on Slack or whatever, but you said I'm more of a face-to-face person, and that's cool, and that's your thing. So own it. Like, if you have to Zoom or be on Teams with people, then just do it that way, but don't feel obligated to be on Slack or anything, but do it your way. A lot of times I feel like we're trying to like pinpoint people into this like box, basically. We're a world of boxes. We're trying to pinpoint people into this box. We don't need to be in the box. Be whatever you want to be. If you want to be a circle, a square, a box, whatever, just be you. That's part of the problem too, is we think that it has to be one all-encompassing answer. No, everyone does things differently, and the way that you do it is awesome because it's the way you do it.
I like that, and it actually made me think Alyssa is actually really good at that, although she won't talk about it. What? But you will use Slack. You will send me video messages on Slack.
I do, and I weirded people out before. Actually, I've interviewed that way before. I sent in a video instead of a CV. And I got hired. Nice. Because I was like, I don't want to fill out this CV and this form. And I was like, here's a video. And they were like, you're the only candidate that's ever sent in a video. And I was like, I don't know.
Alyssa and I will have whole conversations where I will like type a paragraph and I'll get a video and reply.
I'll get a video
type another paragraph and I'll get another video. And then, so I hear you saying it's Slack, but I disagree. I think you found a way to make Slack work for you, and that communication works perfectly for us.
I think that's like a nugget though for people of like, if someone's doing something weird, it might be because it's their best way of communicating, right? So like it's good to be on the lookout and be, I guess, gracious if something odd, you know, like they're like, why are they always sending me videos or whatever the thing is, right? And I think maybe they're just really special and typing isn't their forte, right? I don't know. So, but no,
even Alyssa, to your point, let's stop calling it weird. Let's just say they did something different. We don't all have to do the same thing. Like, it's not weird. Like, if you send me a video first, I'd be like, okay, this is a little different. But then, like, watching it, I'd probably be like, this is kind of cool. I'm not doing that. Kind of cool. Like, sending me, it's almost like sending a voice note.
Oh, right.
The voice note. But I would not, I'm sorry. I'm not a video girl. So for me, I'm like, I try to, let's keep this to a minimum.
Oh, so you're going to type out the words. That's your.
I would send a voice note. So like, you can hear my voice and you can hear me inflecting. I mean, I wouldn't mind typing a note, but like, you know, like everyone's different, but it's like, that goes back to the openness. Just because someone doesn't do it like you doesn't make them weird or like whatever. We just all do things differently, and we need to be open-minded to that. And you need to be open-minded to, I would have never thought to send a video via Slack. So it's like, that's cool that you even like think to do that.
I hope that more people can, because I think once you find that you can be comfortable to do those different things like on a team, and then you are more productive and your team members are working better with you, like I hope more people can try the odd things that they've, like, you know what I mean, like the path flows that they have wanted to try before. Because I don't know, my team they each have their own like oddities or things that like others don't do, but I think because we do have that open environment, I feel very blessed to be part of that, because I've been a part of teams that didn't have that at all. And so I hope this encourages somebody to like try something else. So try something out with their team. But, my goodness, Deena, this has been amazing. Like I love talking with you and learning from you and hearing your stories. And I'm so excited to go and listen to your latest podcast episode. Like
Yes, please do. Leave some feedback too.
Other than Black Tech Unplugged, do you have other resources for people who want to learn more about diversity and inclusion, especially in tech?
Oh, that is a good one. In regards to learning about diversity in tech, there's also another organization that I support, which is called Hustle Crew. And so they're an organization that will actually come in and do like the DEI, the workshops, and help you from an organization or company level for DE&I. And then also, I'm trying to think.
Is it hustlecrew.co?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm missing that one.
Cool. And then also there's just like a ton of resources. Just listen. My podcast, there's a ton of resources on YouTube. If you're ever looking for diversity and inclusion, just type that in and quite a few pop up. I think I know some, and then like also just from like different sectors of tech. So like cybersecurity, if you listen to my current episode and go into the show notes, that the person I interview has a lot of videos of just like how to get in, diversity and inclusion. And then there is another gentleman who's on YouTube, Dewan Lightfoot. He does a lot of like the tech stuff. So lots of resources out there. Apologies that I don't have exact names, but
it's
perfect. Now we spring the question on you.
I think I found at Lab Every Day, maybe.
Yep.
Dewan S. Lightfoot. Perfect. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to share that handle. Weep, bleep, bleep, bloop. Perfect. Amazing.
There we go. And for you specifically, Deena, if folks are interested in hearing more from you and working with you, any of that, again, besides the podcast, where can folks find you?
Yes. So I'm on all social media platforms. If you're looking for me specifically, it's just my name, Deena _ and then my last name, McKay. And then Black Tech Unplugged is on also all social media platforms. So make sure you follow and subscribe on any podcast platform. I'm on Spotify. You can also subscribe to the newsletter and everything if you go to blacktechunplugged.com. And then also available on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the things.
Nice.
All one name though, so you don't have to search.
Oh, that's so nice. There's a couple still that I'm like, I don't own the hand. That's so. Yeah. Look at you on top of your life. That's what that means.
All of mine are old. All of mine are under my maiden name. I just gave up.
Yeah,
there's not a Nanz insight in any of those handles. Whatever. But no, genuinely, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on and sharing your time and your expertise with us. We're so grateful.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate the conversation and more than happy to come back too.
Awesome.
We would love to have you back.
Yes. You're amazing.
Thank you.
All right.
This is us signing off, everybody. This has been an amazing, Kathryn, amazing stream. Like,
amazing.
Thank you for putting together all like the myths and hunting down like the talent. 10 out of 10.
It was a team effort. And thanks to all of y'all who hung in with us. All right, folks, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. And we will see you later.